Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 14, and today I'm here with Denaye Barahona talking about minimalism. Denaye is the voice behind Simple Families, a blog, podcast, and community that helps mothers thrive through simple living, and lives in New York with her husband and 2 children. We are covering all the minimalism goodness today, so get ready to simplify. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. You all have been clicking those stars in your podcast app, and this show now has 28 5-star reviews. Son O Mason, I think that's how you say it, says, "Hell yeah, mama. This show has changed our lives in a matter of weeks, and I can't shut up about it. This woman is legit magic. Thank you, Rachel Rainbolt, for this spectacularly juicy, joyful podcast. You are a parenting ninja. If we ever meet in real life, Son O Mason, I'm going to give you a very big hug. And you can help support this show by leaving your own review in iTunes or in the Apple podcasting app." This week's adventure was Peter Pan, performed at the Kitsap Forest Theater, which felt simply magical. We made a 10-minute hike down a winding forest trail with themed surprises for us to discover, like thimbles hanging from tree branches, until the path opened up to an all-natural amphitheater with seating carved into the hillside and a stage cleared on the forest floor. This 100-year-old theater had full sets and props, and the talented cast performed their hearts out in a light rain that somehow only added to the Neverland ambiance. After the show, we walked down to meet the actors and then hiked up and out to spend hours more playing with our friends and sharing pizza for dinner. I recommend this treasure of an adventure so enthusiastically. If you want to see photos and videos of this adventure, then head on over to Instagram and follow along at Sage Parenting. Today, Denaye is joining me to talk about minimalism. We have been connected through Instagram for a while now, and I really enjoy following her. When I am seeking some inspiration around minimalism with kids, she is one of the people I turn to, whether it's organizing a kid-friendly home, packing for family travel, or designing a new season's capsule wardrobe for the kids. So tell us your story, Denaye. Who are you? What are you passionate about? What about your relationships in life fulfill you? And what is your relationship with this topic of minimalism?
Wow. So where do I begin? Thanks for having me. My name is Denaye, and I run an online community called Simple Families. And I have been running Simple Families for about 1.5 years. And I launched it as I was finishing my PhD in child development. And a little bit about my career history. I started off my career as a clinical social worker. My master's degree is in clinical social work. And I was doing traditional child and family therapy. And I was working with parents who had children with behavior difficulties. And one of the things that I was noticing the most was that most of the behavior difficulties that I was working with were things that were often very developmentally normal. And I really wanted to understand what is within the normal range of behavior for young children and what is outside of the normal range. What do we need to just sort of embrace and work with? Versus what do we actually really need to change? And I think that was the sort of mismatch I was finding in the field of therapy.
The pathologizing, yes, I talk a lot about that.
Yeah, the pathologizing of the behavior that really is normal.
The pathologizing of the natural child.
Yes, exactly. And that happens all the time. Mm-hmm. And often when parents are struggling, they'll be referred to something like play therapy, and you take them and you drop them off at the play therapist's office. And hope for change. And I found very quickly as a young therapist that I couldn't change a child in 1 hour a week. So,
and not without the whole family system in front of you, because most of the time it's not a problem that lives within an individual child.
Yes, exactly. And that the bigger change really came in working with the family and the parents in specific, and making changes with the parents so that they can make changes in the home, since they were the ones there 24/7.
Systems theory shout out.
Yes, absolutely. So I decided that I wanted to understand more about child development so that I could integrate that into my work with families. So I'm really passionate about family wellness, which is, to me, family wellness means taking care of the whole family physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. And with my own family, which I have 2 young children, I have a 2-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, I have found that we function really well when we're calm and we're living a quiet life and we don't have a whole lot of stuff. So that has really brought me to minimalism.
Oh, I love that. And I love seeing your kids on Instagram. They make me smile. And you post lots of stories, which I love because I do too. So we get to see them kind of like running around and living their lives in their environment, which is very inspiring. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you for following along. It's a lot of fun. And I find it's funny because whenever I post something of my kids doing something very normal, I get all these people saying, oh my gosh, your kids are normal too. Like, they have tantrums. And they're like, yes, they're very normal. And part of that and part of my message is that, you know what, it's normal to be normal. And when your kids are acting like this, that's okay. It doesn't always need to be changed. Nothing necessarily needs to be fixed. But instead we need to just embrace some of that. And so I actually it's funny. My daughter is a little bit lives on the wild side a little bit. And I love it. Like every bit of it. My son is more of a rule follower, but every time I see my daughter like throw her arms up in the air and protest, or there's something about it. It's just like, I just love seeing her express her opinion and to speak up for herself and, exercise her rights.
Yes.
So it's funny. I started my career teaching parents how to get their kids to behave, and I actually am starting to enjoy seeing my kids misbehave a little bit. So
absolutely. I can so relate to that on every level. And that's part of why I had you on the podcast. There's like so much alignment there, even in like our story arcs. So let's dive into minimalism a little bit. I want to talk about like, what is minimalism? What does it mean to be a minimalist? And what does it look like? Because there's a whole lot of confusion out there about what it really is and what it means to be one and what it can look like.
Right. So if you came into our house, you wouldn't know that we are minimalists. We certainly don't have an empty house. We don't live in like a white box with like no furniture and one picture hanging on the wall or anything like that. Our house is very comfortable and cozy, and we have the things that we need. So I have a lifelong history of clutter. I always collected a lot of stuff, and I was the kid with the chronic messy room. My childhood memories consist mostly of my mom asking me, or not necessarily asking me, but
cajoling.
Yelling at me to clean up my room. And this went on through my childhood into high school. And I have memories of my mom at every age sort of saying, you're not going to the homecoming dance until your room is clean. You're not doing this until your room is clean. And I was never being naughty. I wasn't being bad by not cleaning my room. I just simply didn't know how to clean my room because I had so much stuff. I didn't have a place for anything. And it was just as frustrating for me as it was for my mom, because she wanted me to clean my room and I wanted to clean my room, and the two of us just didn't seem to know how to make it happen.
Yeah.
So and that went all the way through college. Thank God I had a very patient roommate that lived with me all through college, who, if she's listening to this, I have to say sorry, Natalie, because she put up with my stuff for a long time. It's a good thing that she loves me. I had a lot of stuff in college, a lot of stuff all over the place. And then even into my early adult years, being married to my husband, who has a minimalist heart and who definitely likes his things organized. And he also put up with my stuff all over the place all the time. And it wasn't until I had my first child, when I was, I had just turned 30, And we wandered into a Montessori classroom and found this amazing peace and quiet in a Montessori classroom. And if for anyone that's ever been into a classroom, you'll know that there's not a lot of stuff. And Montessori is really at the heart of minimalism is really at the heart of Montessori, even though it's not something that Maria Montessori ever really talked about. But she recognized that children need fewer choices and they need to know how to put their things away so that they can learn how to take care of their things and really honor the things that are in their lives. So we were really inspired through that experience. We did a Mommy and Me class in a Montessori classroom and really fell in love with the method and wanted to bring that home, and started to work through our house little by little, and found that the spaces that we simplified were the spaces that we wanted to spend time in. And it's funny, when I got rid of my wardrobe, and which was, I think that was in 2015, I wrote a blog post on it and it went viral immediately and kind of set off the capsule wardrobe phenomena back in the day. And I had no idea that, so I was on this path to minimalism. All I know was I read something about a capsule wardrobe and I felt called to it. I was like, I have to do this, and I have to do this right now. It was something that I like.
A fire had been lit.
Yes. And once I did that, like, I wanted to be in my closet all the time. So I felt that pull to do the other areas of my house to make those places that I wanted to be as well.
Oh, I love that story. And I can so relate. I actually was an assistant director at a Montessori preschool in college for a while. And so environment is something that Montessori does really, really well. I can totally see how that would be appealing and sort of a bridge into minimalism for you guys. I think, like, when we're talking about what minimalism is, it's really letting go of what doesn't matter to hold space for what does. And it's a philosophy and practice, like more of an intention than a destination. So for me, it means I align my home and my bank account and my calendar with my values. So it does refer to stuff, but also to time and money and ingredients and relationships. And it looks different for everyone, but it tends to be less stuff, more space, and more clarity. We tend to value people over things, experiences over acquisition, and time over money. And the first step of sage parenting, and the first chapter in all of my books, is letting go of all the inherited parenting bullshit that takes up all the space and gets in the way of connection and natural learning, which is what we truly value. So to me, minimalism is getting clear on your values and aligning your life with those values.
Yeah, and dropping the guilt. Yeah. The guilt around hanging on to gifts that somebody gave you that you don't even like. And guilt around this idea that you have to go to every birthday party that you're invited to.
Yes, the obligation.
I feel like it's liberating.
So liberating. And, you know, when I at one point asked on Facebook, which of my friends, like who out there in my Facebook circle identifies as a minimalist? And I had like 30 comments at least of people saying, I strive to live a minimalist lifestyle, and my values are in alignment and blah, 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 but I don't know if I could call myself a minimalist. So a lot of people have this notion that it's sort of this really high bar of, like you said, like you live in like an all white home with nothing on shelves and, like 10 objects to your name. So I hope that we can kind of expand that definition of minimalist, being a minimalist a bit today.
Yeah, I called myself an aspiring minimalist for a long time because I didn't feel like I could fully call myself a minimalist until my house looked like that. And then I realized it wasn't about what my house looks like or the amount of things that I have. It's about the intent that goes into how I fill my life, exactly. How I fill my calendar, how I fill my closet, that sort of thing, and the intent behind that. And that is definitely minimalist. And yes. So once I embraced that and realized it's not about how much stuff, it's about what goes into making the decisions around not just the stuff, but the schedule and the life. I think that's when I really said, I'm going to call myself a minimalist. But to be honest, it really doesn't matter if you put a label on it. I don't think there has to be this label, because it's not a destination. It's not like, all right, we're down to 99 things. Now we're minimalist.
Where's my badge? Did I earn the patch?
Yeah, no, it's a journey, and it's just a philosophy that is underlying your journey, and it's not about the labels. So yeah, and I actually think the labels are really off-putting. If I like met someone at a picnic or something, I was like, oh yeah, we're minimalist, they'd be like, yeah, we're not friends anymore. Like, I just feel like it's really off-putting for a lot of people, because it seems I don't know,
intimidating,
or what's the word? Yeah, or just elitist, sanctimonious. Like, I don't know. It just feels. It doesn't feel welcoming. It's to me. I don't know. It's funny because I have a hard time talking about it with people I don't know well, because I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of preconceived notions around the idea.
Well, and hopefully us having this conversation on the podcast today can help to shift the impression that people get when they hear that label.
Yes, absolutely.
Denaye is actually not of the attachment parenting unschooling persuasion, and that's okay. If I was only in connection with and informed and inspired by people whose values, beliefs, and perspectives were identical to mine, I would miss out on so much rich learning. Where we are aligned is simple family living, and that is what we're chatting about today. But I'm going to take a minute here to speak to something important from my perspective. One big way that minimalism shows up for me is in my parenting. I spent years writing, speaking, and coaching around what I sometimes referred to as clearing the school clutter or unpacking the parenting baggage, because I saw that before we could move forward living in connection with our children in a way that aligned with our true values, natural intuition, and learned wisdom, we had to let go of everything that held us down, everyone else's shoulds and should nots, and all those inherited beliefs, assumptions, and expectations. Think manufactured manipulation like cry it out or time out. As I learned more about minimalism and simplicity, I realized that those words and movements succinctly articulated what I was saying, but in this space, no one else was applying it. Natural parenting and learning has a strong strand of minimalism woven throughout. If you were dropped on a deserted island, how would you parent? How would your children learn? Now back to the conversation with Denaye. Well, let's talk about time, because unbusy is one of my favorite words. And if I had to sum up our minimalist relationship with time in one word, that would be it. On the mainstream path, kids are plagued with busyness by well-intentioned parents trying to give them every advantage in a race that you don't have to participate in. Busy does not equate to success. So over here, we hold open space in our calendars and our lives and our rhythm. And what blossoms in that space is creativity and peace and self-driven project-based learning. I could go on. So what does it mean to be minimalist with time? And what does that look like for your family, Denaye?
So we love having completely open weekends. My husband works long hours. He rarely sees the kids during the week. He's usually gone. Oh, he'll see them maybe for like 10 or 15 minutes in the morning, but he's usually gone around the time they wake up and comes back after they go to bed. So the weekends are family time for us, and that we just don't really like to do much of anything else. I mean, sometimes we like to see friends, but I think because we do have limited family time during the week, that we really honor that time on the weekends. And so during the week, it's me with the kids, and we just this week actually hired an au pair from Poland who joined our family. So she's going to be joining me with the kids this summer, which I think will be really fun to have an extra person to join in on the fun for the summer. But during the week, we don't really plan a lot. I am kind of a homebody, and I love being at home, and my kids also love being at home, and I think they get restless, but that's usually when they spend too much time indoors. Mm-hmm. So minimalism has really propelled us to build a relationship with nature, because the less stuff and the less entertainment that you have inside, the more you get outside. Yeah. And I've kind of always had a little bit of a craving for a tiny home, because I think that if we had a tiny home, we would spend like all of our days outside, because we would feel so cooped up in the tiny home. Can't get my husband on board with that yet, but maybe someday. But Yeah, so for us, time-wise, I think we try to spend as much time as possible outside. I think there's so much research that's showing that the outdoors is really therapeutic for people of all ages. And I know that when it comes to behavior for my kids, if they are, in particular, if they're picking at each other and they're getting on each other's nerves, it means immediately we go outside. That's when you're like, it's like you could discipline them, you could send them to their rooms, but really they don't need to go to their rooms. They need to go outside.
Oh my gosh, that is so exactly true. Podcast episode 11 is all about nature with Nicolette Souter. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram. She's amazing.
What's the name of her? What's her
Wilder
platform called?
Child.
Yes, yeah, I do follow her.
Yeah, so she's amazing. So we just put out a podcast episode, episode 11, that is all about nature and living that like unbusy lifestyle with like deep connection with nature. So you would love it. You would have to go listen to it, and it ties in perfectly with all of these things that you're saying.
Great. Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to that because that is something. It's funny that there's all these things that have come from getting rid of my stuff that I never expected. Yeah. And that's one of those things. Like I never expected this association with getting rid of my stuff with connecting to nature. But really the less things that I have, the more that I want to get out. And but don't get me wrong, I really actually enjoy being inside my house more because I have less stuff and it's cleaner too. But yeah, I think that especially when it comes to kids, this idea of you don't need a ton of toys because you can go outside and play. I think that mentality really, really speaks to me.
Yeah, nature is the absolute best playground and provides so many amazing materials to use in different types of play and creativity.
Yeah. Did I answer I don't even know. I think I went off on a tangent.
We're talking about time. Well, I'll say
time.
A pet peeve of mine is when people say, I don't have time. Because if there is one equalizer across humanity, it's that we are all given the same number of hours in each day, and you make choices based on your priorities. So I really try to empower people to own those choices. And it's not about judgment. Like I have no attachment to how you choose to spend your time, but I just want to empower everyone with that choice piece. So when you first look at your calendar, it's going to seem like it's full of things that are immovable, but they actually are. So the next time you're about to say, I can't, really try to shift it to, I choose not to. And you'll begin to see that all the things, you'll really begin to see all the things you're saying yes to, and then all the things you're saying no to in a fresh light. Because we want like your values to be your compass. And just asking yourself, is your time aligned with your values, is a really powerful exercise.
Yeah, and learning how to say no, I think, is really powerful when it comes to commitments.
Yes.
And I actually get really inspired when people tell me no. And it's funny, like I asked a fellow blogger if she wanted, I invited her to be on the podcast a couple months ago, and she's a friend, and she declined and said, I've got a lot on my plate right now. It was over the holidays. I've got a lot on my plate right now. I appreciate you asking, but I'm going to have to decline. And I was like, you know what? Good for you. Like, good for you to say no. And when you know that it's outside of the range of what's going to be comfortable for you to commit to.
Yes.
And whenever something like that happens, I'm always like kind of like smiling and being like, good, I'm glad you said no. I think that when you say no and you say no without an excuse like that, that's not an excuse. That's honesty. I think you inspire other people to do it, and you show the other people that it's possible. So I never make up excuses. If we choose not to do something as a family, I always say, we are going to take it easy this weekend. So we're going to keep our weekend clear and just spend time at home. But we appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, without apologizing for it.
Right, exactly. And without making up an excuse like, we already have plans or something like that.
Yeah.
I think I don't have any need to pretend that I'm super busy and super important. So I'm perfectly happy to say that, no, we have nothing and we like it that way.
And we're not going to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how other people feel when they hear that, but I love to hear that from other people because I think that it's something that our society needs more of.
Yes, I try to practice radical honesty, which that doesn't mean like I overshare or say things that are unnecessary, but I am always honest. So I so appreciate that from other people. And like you said, that really carves out the space for other people to to be honest, and to use their values as a compass and align all of those yeses and nos and all of those choices with those values.
Right. Absolutely.
So let's talk about the playscape. You mentioned that a little bit earlier. In the Sage Homeschooling book, I have a chapter called Environment, because the environment plays a huge role in the life and learning of unschoolers especially. And I've heard you talk about that on your podcast too. So we invite materials, and we favor materials over toys, into this space with intention based on our children's interests. But more is not better. So in that chapter, I go over a long list of materials that have added value for us, but I am super clear that we do not have all of those materials at the same time. Open time is valuable, as is open space. So talk to me about minimalism in the playscape.
So although I do love Montessori, we don't practice Montessori. We practice Montessori in our parenting, but we don't have traditional Montessori materials in our house, because I find that there are a lot of Montessori materials, and that's just not something that I aspire to do, is to have this perfect Montessori environment. So I would say that the way that we set up our playscape is very much Montessori inspired, in that all the materials are out and accessible. We've recently hung up floating shelves. So there's 2 long floating shelves, and I've put trays on those, very Montessori inspired, with materials for my kids. Some of those materials are toys. Some of them are art supplies. It really depends. But I try to focus on open-ended objects. So I always encourage my audience to focus on about a 75-25 split between open and closed toys. And open toys I consider to be open-ended toys, which many people are familiar with. So whether that's silk scarves or a simple dollhouse, a toy that can be used in many different ways by children of all ages, both genders. And closed toys are things like puzzles or shape sorters, toys that can be mastered. So once your child does them, they can say, ta-da, I'm done. Things that can be finished. And I think that there is real value in closed toys. The problem with having a lot of closed toys is you're going to need a lot of them, because children move through them more quickly, because they don't have as much potential for creativity and innovation. So they're not without value. But I don't think that we should be filling our homes with them when we're choosing toys and choosing materials. So sure, have a puzzle or 2. We usually have 1 puzzle for my son and 1 puzzle for my daughter out at any given time. But don't overdo it on the closed toys, because then you're going to end up with a lot of stuff, and your children will also outgrow that stuff a lot, so you'll find yourself buying things more frequently. But as far as the specific items that we keep, we generally keep the same thing for long periods of time. It's not like we really outgrow toys, because I do try to pick the toys that are going to last for many years and hold the interest of my kids for many years. That's what we aspire to, at least. But recently we've been really putting less and less out for our kids, because we really want to be getting out more. So it's because the weather has been so beautiful. So I don't feel like I need to have a ton of stuff inside, because we're just really not spending a whole lot of time inside. So I think it waxes and wanes at different times of the year as far as to what type of stuff we have and how much stuff we have. But I like to have a lot of open space for my kids to move too, because I think that movement is so, so important for young children.
Yeah, I think that we have to think of it in terms of all the different areas of development. So for example, like gross motor play is huge for kids. So like furniture that your kids can build forts out of and launch off of, and the type of sofa that they can climb on, and a coffee table that they can flip over and use in a new way. And so I try to think of everything in the home environment as a material in the playscape, because if you give your kids that access to all of these materials that you already have and that you use, it just opens up this whole other world of play opportunity. And then also, I mean, we're gonna talk about ownership in a minute here, but we don't have to invest in every toy that we buy. So we try to, if there could be like a library system for toys, I think that would be freaking amazing. And so we have basically tried to create that with like our network of friends and our network of homeschoolers and our local Buy Nothing group. So if one of my kids is really passionate about some specific thing, I will reach out and ask if anyone has any materials based around that specific thing. And then when they've moved on from that specific thing, I will put those things back out there for other people to come and pick up. So the system works really well. And then really basing the materials on your kids' interests and needs. So if your kid is super interested in butterflies, like you can get materials and toys and books and things that are around that interest. And it's okay if that's temporary, because again, we're just sort of like cycling things through based on those interests.
Yes, I think that is so wise. I also, one of the things that I try to avoid is a lot of character toys, because I feel like they come and go like the wind with every hit movie. But I also know that they do bring my kids a lot of joy, and I've seen some really great creative play out of some character toys. Yeah. So I don't limit them entirely, but I also tend to veer away from them. My son, like a year ago when he was 3, was loving Paw Patrol, and every time he went to one of his friends' houses, he played with her little Paw Patrol figurines, and it was just like the little dogs, like they didn't have like noises or buttons or anything. And I ended up rounding up some used ones from some friends who had multiple, because like I guess every time you buy a Paw Patrol toy, it comes with an animal, so you end up with like 6 Skies and like 4 Marshalls. So I got some from friends used, and he played beautifully with them. He just had the dogs, and then he used like his magnetiles to make houses and like cars and that kind of thing. So I think when we're thinking about toys like that, we don't necessarily need like the Paw Patrol dog and the vehicle and all the accessory pieces. That sometimes we can just get the little dog, and then the kids can use their creativity to put it to use as well. So I think that keeping those things limited really helps to reduce waste and helps to focus on toys that are going to keep our kids engaged. But I also think that sometimes those things really do bring a lot of joy to our children, and they can be used really creatively.
Oh, absolutely. We love magnetiles. That's one of my favorite materials that I recommend a lot. And we just a few months ago gifted a collection of Paw Patrol guys that my kid had asked for Christmas, like had been pining for them. And I think all those things you said, it's so individual to the child too, because my first, who's now 12, loved playing with, we call them guys, which are like character figurines. And so she wasn't a big fan of blocks or, a lot of other things, but guys were her jam. And so we would, based on the movies or the types of play she was interested in at the time, we would get guys, and she had this collection, and we would use all of them. I mean, she would basically create these whole towns or these whole civilizations, and all the characters did different things. And whereas like my youngest is not that into guys, so I think really taking your cues from your kids. If we're walking through a toy store and my youngest is interested in guys, I'm going to take far more of a pause than I would have with my oldest. So just keeping that in mind, that the ways that your kids prefer to play.
Ellen Galinsky wrote a book called The 6 Stages of Parenthood, and one stage she talks about image making, and it's really about how we have this image set forth for our children that we create in our minds, whether we know it or not, and really recognizing what that is, because a lot of times it doesn't represent who our kids are at all. Yeah. And being conscious of that, because it pushes us in one direction or another. And like, how do we stay objective when it comes to our kids and their interests? It's really tough. And I'm totally off topic now. So.
That's okay. I know I'm about to launch into, based on all these things you're saying, I want to launch into this like 30-minute thing about radical acceptance, but I'm gonna use self-control and not. So let's talk about ownership. One piece to our Playscape story is around ownership, and ownership is just not a value in our family, and this directly correlates to attachment or lack thereof to things. This is a powerful strand of minimalism that is woven into our family culture, and it evolved naturally for us. We have all of our materials in the family space where everyone plays, and if someone is really into something, they are welcome to bring it into their bedroom, and it can be quote unquote theirs to play with on their own until they are ready to move on, and then they bring it back out and the cycle continues. Once we are finished with something, we pass it on to another family through our local Buy Nothing group or to friends. And I think of Buy Nothing in our circle of friends like a library for stuff, like I mentioned earlier, and it's really brilliant. The other day, my friend asked in her group for a rock tumbler, and someone said, "Yeah, I have one sitting in my garage. You're welcome to." So you can follow that self-directed learning passion without spending a fortune or amassing a materials graveyard in your garage. But your family culture may very well be completely opposite of that. So how does your family navigate ownership as minimalists?
So we don't really have anything that is specifically my son's or specifically my daughter's when it comes to toys. My daughter has some stuffed animals that she sleeps with that stay in her bed all the time. And my son is not interested in those. So I would say those are hers, but at the same time, if he ever wanted to play with them, I think that would be fine too. And my son, he has each of them, they only have so she has those stuffed animals in her room, and he has a little container of trains in his room, and that's the only toys that they have in their respective rooms. But my daughter plays with those. She goes in there and will play with those. So yeah, there's when it comes to toys and materials and kids stuff, there's not ownership. And even when it comes to my stuff, I really don't mind when my kids touch and use my own personal things.
Agreed.
With the exception of makeup. I have a no touch my makeup rule. It's just completely off limits. But other than that, like my kids are really respectful with stuff. So they aren't breaking my things. They're mostly respecting them. And if they do disrespect or break something, I think it's a teachable moment. So yeah, we feels very open to that. And we also follow the rule that you can play with something as long as you want. And when you're done with it, somebody else can play with it. So you don't necessarily have to take 5 minutes and pass it to somebody else for 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah, that sounds really similar. And in the unschooling community, I sometimes get a lot of pushback on this, and I'm happy to engage in conversations around it, because it's one of the first things that people say is like, well, is your iPhone everyone's iPhone? And I always say, like, yeah, actually it is. It's the family phone. Like, we don't have a house phone. So yeah, if they need to make a phone call, they absolutely know that they can pick up my phone and make a phone call. That's a great example. Thank you.
Right. Now, my kids are not allowed access to my iPhone unless they're not old enough to make a phone call.
My kids are a little older than yours.
Yeah, but if they needed to, yes, of course, they would be able to make a phone call if they needed to, if they were of age. But yeah, I think that's another thing but more for boundary purposes, that we limit screen time. I think that is one of the reasons. That is the reason that it's off limits.
Yeah, I mean, I think that too, it starts when they're really young. I have talked a lot about access to the whole environment, and as opposed to like childproofing, and I know you have talked about that as well. And this topic of ownership with things sort of feels like it ties into that, because instead of like blocking everything off and saying this is a child's thing, this is yours, and this is a grown-up thing, this is mine, we that's just not how we approach our belongings. This is our family home, and all of these different materials that we use have value for us in some ways, and they add value for the kids in other ways. And so I think that it really evolved naturally for us. So I didn't set out saying like, we will have shared belongings and we are socialists and down with capitalism. Like it did not come from a place of that. I think it just has made sense to our kids. And so it's evolved naturally. And we, make little mores and things in our family culture as things come up. Like, we really don't keep toys in the bedrooms, but like I said, if someone's really into something right now and their play carries on from day to day and they want to have things set up that no one else touches, they'll bring it into their room. And that my kids have set up like that rule that if someone brings a toy into their room, like that set is for them. It means they're working on it, like it's ongoing. And so they don't want anyone to mess it up. And then in the main play living area. We tend, especially because my kids are older now, we don't exclude. So if someone asks to join in, they're welcome to join in. When they were younger, of course, that was different because it wasn't developmentally appropriate. Now that they are older, that's how it is. And if they want to do something alone or they don't want to be bothered, they can again go take it to their own space. So I think that the ownership piece really extends nicely into minimalism, because as my kids taught me this way of being, because I was not raised that way, so as my kids taught me this way of being, I was able to extend it to all of these other things too, where I felt so invested in these objects, like they were mine. And so through my kids teaching me this way of being, I was really able to let go of a lot of stuff because I was able to shift my relationship with that ownership piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about role modeling. If you have been listening to the Sage Family Podcast, then you are not going to be surprised to hear me bring up role modeling. When parents ask me how to foster minimalism in their children, role modeling is my first answer. Just like it was with fostering a love of reading in episode 8 and fostering empathy in episode 7 on discipline. So what have you observed around the power of role modeling in a minimalist family?
Everything. I think that our kids are very much as they live in our reflections. We are mirrors, and they learn so much from us. And that's really our biggest tool in raising well-adjusted kids, is that we have to be well-adjusted ourselves, and that we have our own sense of calm and our own sense of peace and contentment in the lives that we're leading. And I found that the happier that I am and the more content, not just with my home and with my space, but with the way that I'm spending my time, that I am, the happier that my kids are. And I think that it's everything. So they don't ask for a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of conversation about buying new things, although they do think that the UPS truck is kind of like Santa Claus, which is interesting. I don't know. I just don't know how to really rationalize that. It is kind of like Santa Claus because like the UPS truck brings like boxes with the new stuff, because we live very rurally. So I have to order a lot of stuff. I even order like normal stuff like shampoo sometimes. So yeah, the truck does bring us a decent amount of stuff. Most of it's perishables and that kind of thing. But they don't say like but you know, the other thing is, I think that has been really easy, is that they don't watch commercials on television. So they get a little bit of screen time, but it doesn't include any commercials. So they're really not ever exposed to mainstream toys unless we're at Target and they're kind of like perusing the toy aisles. That's the only time that they really see that kind of stuff. They're still young enough that it's just they don't really see it and they don't really ask for it, and it's been very much a non-issue at this point. And they do see it when they go to friends' houses, but I think that is really important. And a lot of people say, well, what are you going to do when your kids go to friends' houses and they see all this stuff and they want this stuff? And I think that it's just the very beginning of setting up this relationship to understand that every family is unique. We all have our own unique family culture, and ours is such that we have different stuff from them, and there's nothing wrong with that. No one culture is better than the other. And it's really fun to visit the houses of other people and to experience their culture. And maybe that in culture includes like a full set of Transformers and awesome, like go play, like that's completely fine. So that has really been a non-issue. I think modeling the contentment around that, the contentment of not trying to keep up with the Joneses, is something that's really powerful, because I think when we as adults and as parents are trying to keep up with our neighbors and our friends and buying everything that our friends and neighbors are buying, that our kids are going to be doing the same. Although I think we'll probably all see some of that with our kids as they grow, regardless of what we're doing. I think that's a natural inclination to imitate your friends. So I think that's something I'm prepared to see come about as my kids get older. Have you seen some of that in your kids?
No, and I think it's because the role of the peer group, I think in that mainstream, especially in traditional public school, is very different, especially like top-down power structure in families tends to rely on like you do what I say and you don't question it. And so kids' minds are sort of trained to just do what the people in authority tell them. And then when they reach adolescence, their people become their peers. And so then they're just sort of replicating and doing what they are doing. I have seen in the homeschooling community that really doesn't happen. I think also in a more like respectful parenting dynamic, the kids are they have a seat at the table in terms of creating the family culture. So it's not just top down coming from the parents. Like I wouldn't step in and say, we're minimalists. So this means you're not going to have this and we're not going to do that. So we sort of all get a seat at the table in writing our family's story. And that includes like taking their journeys into consideration. So if they want to explore something, like we hold the space for that. So at this point anyways, and with all of the people that we surround ourselves with in our community, I really don't see much of that. I think one essential ingredient to role modeling is authenticity, though, which you kind of touched on. But by that, I mean, if you are putting on a show in an attempt to manipulate your children and push for a predetermined outcome, you are really setting your family up to fail. So, like, if minimalism resonates with you, then live it for yourself while in connection with your children. And that's like the most powerful thing that you can do.
Yes, completely. And not every child is going to jump on board right away. Yeah. Not every spouse is going to jump on board right away. Yeah. And that's okay. Maybe they never will. I think that we all can start to take care of our own stuff and our own spaces. I know for me, just starting in my closet was so powerful to have. I had my own closet in our former house and I simplified my closet and that was my space and it felt amazing and it made me want to move through the rest of my house and do that. And I could at that point mostly because my kids were really young, but I certainly wasn't in my husband's closet. I mean, that was his business, but it didn't take him long to be like, yep, let's do this. Because he experienced how it felt, like, especially when we simplified our kids' playroom. And that was just, it was funny. We like wanted to hang out there on the weekends in the playroom because it was so simple and calming.
Yeah, if you are being a light, that will shine on other people. So like if you are reaching for your best self and living your best life and doing that well in connection with these other people, that is going to affect them. And as long as you don't have an attachment to an outcome, that effect is going to be really sincere. So for example, if you're like, everybody watch as I throw away this pair of shoes, you're not doing that, look over at your closet, but watch as I throw them away. If you're like really doing it in a manipulative way, it's not sincere. And so it's not going to have that effect of true role modeling. But my kids are really affected when they see me cleaning things out and letting things go, and they see me happy in the space that is freed up, and they see me prioritize like people and connections and experiences. We get to have so many experiences, so I'll let them into that decision making. It's like, oh, I really want that new pair of shoes, but I really want to buy passes to the nature preservation more. Like, so I think I'm gonna not spend the money on that and put it toward this instead. And sort of letting them in, giving them that access to your decision making process is really powerful.
Right. And I think it applies to all areas of life. It makes me think about exercising. Like if my husband told me I needed to go exercise, I'd be like, what? Like, you don't tell me what to do. But if he goes to exercise, I'm very inspired to exercise. I'm like, oh, well, he's actually, should I do it? Like, I probably should do it if he's doing it. And it goes both ways on that. Like if I get like this morning, I got up to exercise. He's like, oh, I wish I would have exercised. So like that role modeling of good behavior and good, I don't want to call exercise good behavior, of like positive behaviors is so powerful on so many levels for so many things.
Yeah. Or something that's adding value for you. Like people will then be more likely to want to try it on. Like right now, I'm glad there's no video because I have stuff all around my desk area because I pulled out my keepsake boxes from my childhood and I've been like documenting it on Instagram, but I've been going through all of my sentimental things. And so my kids, like they each have one keepsake box in the top of their closet. And that's like the boundary for their keepsakes. And they have like pulled them down and been like going through them, which is like so sweet. But like it really speaks to that role modeling piece that like as I'm doing the work, it's kind of contagious.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is.
Yeah. So let's talk about boundaries. On the mainstream parenting and educational path, children are drowning in arbitrary boundaries. So while we are often pushing back against unquestioned boundaries, some consciously adopted boundaries can be healthy and helpful. Basically, minimalist boundaries, right? Like applying that to boundaries as well. But I have found physical boundaries for stuff to be so helpful for my children and my sanity. It's been a way to live in freedom and collaboration while holding the space for my needs and for family house needs. For example, we have a dress-up bin. The other day, 2 of my kids asked for black geese for ninja play, and I responded, is there space in the dress-up for it? So they went to the dress-up bin and dumped it out and made a keep and donate pile, and left ample room for the new costumes that they wanted for the imaginative play that they were so inspired to engage in. So that bin provides the boundary for dress up. And we have the same system with stuffed animals, which is another type of toy that often overruns houses with children. I just mentioned the keepsake box, like they each have a box in the top of their closet for their keepsakes. If they want to add art and it's full, they'll have to pull something else out. So what boundaries have you found helpful for your family?
Personally, I only have so many hangers because I know that once I'm out of hangers, I have too many clothes. And I think that's something that has been very helpful. Shelf space for my kids, for their toys, that it has to fit on the shelves. And if it doesn't fit on the shelves, then it either needs to go. We do have a small closet of storage for things that sometimes get rotated in. It either goes in there, or if it's something that they just don't use or they have outgrown, then it goes into the donations. So I'm a big fan of doing some sort of demarcation on the floor for play spaces. I think that especially if you're doing a shared living and playroom area, that it helps to have like a rug or like a rubber mat or something where kids know that sort of this is not necessarily this is the area you have to play in, but this is where the toys go. So like this is where the things are to be returned to. I think it gives kids some guidance on how to keep those spaces well put together.
Yeah. Like we have a Lego box. And it's this giant Lego box where they keep all the Lego parts. We've tried different systems of organization, but they actually just prefer to have one big Lego bin. And what we've come to learn is that when they really want to dive deep into Lego play, which is often, if they lay out one of our blankets from the blanket closet first, it makes cleanup super easy because they can dump out the whole box and then they can just pick up the blanket and shake it into the Lego bin as opposed to picking them up one at a time, like times 1,000. And that works really well. And it's sort of what you talked about too. Like it kind of defines the space of this is where the Lego explosion should be contained, because then it makes cleanup so much easier. So I'm not standing there saying you cannot take a Lego off of this blanket, which they lay out on the rug in the great room. But they are just sort of learning naturally as they play, and I can sort of help them by pointing things out that if all the Legos are on the blanket, this is how you can clean it up this way, and it just takes seconds. It's so much easier. So yeah, just having like those defined spaces and ways that the kids can easily access them and clean them up, I think can go a long way in helping with that.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, we have like a nature tray too. It's like this big tin round tray that sits right on our coffee table, and that's where my youngest especially loves to collect nature treasures while we're out on our nature adventures. And he brings them home and he puts them in the nature tray, and that's where he can like look at them with magnifying glasses and paint them or whatever. We use them for all kinds of things, but that's like the defined space for the nature treasures. So if you want to bring in some more and it's full, like he has to take some of those out, and he usually spreads them in the walkway and like decorates our entryway to our house outside with them, which is beautiful. But again, there's like that defined space, which helps to keep things manageable.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
All right, let's talk about extended family, because my extended family are not minimalists, and that is pretty common. So what advice do you have for families navigating relationships with extended family or friends who don't get minimalism?
So I think that it's very complicated because it becomes a family value. And I know for us that this has become part of our family values. And a lot of times, or almost all the time, our family values are something that have been passed down from the previous generation. So when the new generation, such as ourselves, are starting to follow a new value that can some often run in opposition to the value that they were raised with, I think that there's always some tension there, whether it's, you know, you were raised one religion and you change to another religion, or you're making a big life change. And I think that it's hard to understand and it's hard to explain. And I know that it's taken a lot of time for our families to really understand what our goals are and why we do what we do. I can't say that they always agree with our decisions, but I think that they do like our goals and like what underlies them. But they also, like the grandparents, also really like to buy gifts for the kids. So it's a balance. And I think that it's an expectation from me that it's not going to be one conversation. It's not like I talked to you once about this and they change their buying forever. It's this ongoing conversation about how this concept is really impacting our lives and really living it. I think if they see us buying a ton of stuff for our kids for Christmas, even though we say we're minimalists, then they're going to take that as a cue to buy a bunch of stuff for our kids for Christmas as well. Right. So I think we need to model it for our families as well, so that they can see what we are doing, specifically around special occasions and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to consider that when you say we are doing things differently, they are hearing you think what we have done is wrong. And
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and that's the case really with so many aspects of parenting or education, or with so many values, that when you say you're doing something differently, it's just important to have a little bit of empathy and knowing that what they are hearing is that you think how they did it is wrong. And like you said, it's not like one conversation, it's multiple things, and role modeling really comes into play. I think where you don't have an attachment to an outcome, like I'm not trying to convince my extended family to be minimalists, but that I'm just living in a way that they can see, and hear and be touched by how those values are playing out for us, and they can sort of see why they're important for us and what we're getting out of it, so that they can understand it, even if they don't necessarily want to adopt it for themselves. And then having those boundaries for extended family too, like around gift giving, for example. We tell our extended family that we want things like experiences. So my extended family will buy us like membership someplace or passes someplace, or and I can actually say this because this isn't going to come out until after their birthdays, but we're about to leave for a trip to Orcas Island for my husband and my son's birthday. They share birthday and Father's Day, and my mom got them we're staying at this like farm cabin place run by this family, and they have kayak rentals. So my mom got them kayak rentals for their birthday. So like just holding out that boundary is that like we don't want a bunch of stuff, and if you're going to send a bunch of stuff, we're really not going to use it. We'll probably thank you and appreciate the thought and then regift it. So if you really want to get us something that will add value for us, giving them ideas. So I think a lot of times people get kind of stuck in this cycle of saying no, but without really offering them a yes. Like, so what can they do? What would add value for your family and would also give them that joy that they get while they're gift giving?
Yes. And I think that it comes to a point where we need to consider this a part of our values and consider the fact that we are teaching kids to stand up for their values. And if this is a family value, then it's one that's worth standing up for and one that's worth talking about. And that's something they're going to need to learn how to do for a lifetime. And if you're too afraid to have that conversation with your family, what are you teaching your kids about standing up for values, right? If it's important to you, you need to speak up for it and you need to talk about it and communicate it. And that's really important. I think it's an important thing that we're teaching our kids, that if it's important to you, then speak up.
Yes, absolutely. Be an assertive advocate for yourself and for your values and for your needs and for your wants. And like you mentioned earlier about experiencing different family cultures, that's valuable too. Like when my kids go over to my sister's house and immerse themselves in how they live differently, and then come back home, like there's learning that's happened from that. Like they have learned things from that and they've felt what that feels like. And that's powerful too. So I don't even necessarily think that I don't want to insulate my kids from like, you can never go to someone else's house and you can never see their toys and you can, like that's not the type of life or parenting that we engage in, because there's learning in being in connection with people who are different and who live differently.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's move into our Q&A. So I posted in the Sage Parenting Tribe on Facebook that we were going to chat about minimalism today and asked if anyone had any questions about it. Noelle says, I find navigating minimalism joyful and freeing for myself. I find living with a non-minimalist husband and children less joyful. The living with them part is wonderful. Their stuff is harder on me. I would love to learn how to enjoy a minimalist home in a blended family.
So this is tough. And this goes back to you really only control your own stuff. And you do, to some extent, have control over the stuff that your kids bring into your home. Mm-hmm. And there's two methods to that, is that you are buying less stuff for your kids and you're being intentional about the way you're buying, and you're having conversations with the gift givers, the other family members, about what they're buying as well. And I think that those two ways, I mean, you can't necessarily make your kids get rid of all their stuff or your spouse get rid of all of their stuff, but you can prevent the constant incoming of the stuff. Yeah. So sort of stop it in its tracks and then move forward. And that stuff you can slowly start to get rid of that stuff as it gets old and as it's broken and that sort of thing. But by decreasing the amount of stuff coming into your home, you can really make progress on that.
Yeah. I mean, we cannot force another person to evolve, no matter how much we love them. All we can do is intentionally evolve ourselves, and then our children and our partners and exponentially on out will be affected by that light. And know that when one person in the family system changes, it changes everyone. Though change is almost always uncomfortable at first, such is the arc of growth. So focus on fostering freedom and joyful and better alignment with your values for yourself. And then you can also highlight the benefits for your loved ones in terms that would be of value to them. So like if you're saying no to buying a toy, talk about what you're then saying yes to, what you want to use that money for. And don't just throw away all of their stuff, because that is a recipe for hoarding and enemy positioning. So if you are just focused on being intentional in the way that you want to evolve yourself and working on the things that are within your control, that is the absolute best thing you can do to encourage other people to follow suit. But throwing away their stuff is going to put them on the opposite side of the battlefield. And even if maybe they were actually pretty in alignment and they were just a little farther behind on the timeline than you, if you throw away their stuff, like you are going to launch them to the other side of the battlefield. And as far as kids go, that is like, if I were to say, how could you raise a hoarder? Like, that would be it, would be getting rid of all their stuff without their consent.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a dangerous pattern to get into. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it teaches anyone anything when you're getting rid of stuff for them. They need to learn how to start making those decisions for themselves over what they value and what they don't value and how to make those decisions.
Absolutely. So let's move into a day in the life. Describe your favorite day this week and share with us why you loved it.
So let's see. We just returned from a long weekend in Washington, D.C. visiting friends, and we spent a day just really doing nothing and wandering around. And I think that is sort of what I live for. I think about what weekends are going to look like as our kids get older. We were spending some time with some friends who have 7-year-olds, and he was like, our weekends are now sort of like soccer games and activities for kids. And I think about that, and I I don't really want that for my weekends in the future. I know that my husband does to some extent, so I think it's going to be an evolving conversation. That's how his childhood was. He had a lot of soccer games and events on the team things on the weekends, and that was life for several years. I just want my weekends, well, in my dream life, I have a lake house, and we go there. We go there every weekend, and I sit on the dock, and my kids paddle around in the water all weekend, and I watch them. And that's all we do. So,
That's
but that
fantastic.
I know isn't it? Yeah. So if that ever comes true and I ever get a lake house, I'll be dragging my whole family there and we'll be doing nothing. And those will be my perfect days. But I know that that's not going to happen because life isn't all about me. And there's other people in this family who have other things that they want to do and other goals they want to pursue. So for me personally, I just really love doing nothing and being home. And we do a lot of that. But I also know that as my kids grow, that I really want to respect their needs and their interests. And the same for my husband, really finding a balance for everybody. So I don't know what that will look like in the future, but right now it's less is more is my perfect day for sure.
Yes, less is more, and just keep questioning every step along the way. I think I do a lot of homeschool coaching, and a lot of families come with this. Like we talk about in minimalism, like this mark of success is like having more stuff and doing more stuff, and extracurriculars really play into that, like recipe for a well-rounded human being. And so I really encourage a lot of families to question that and to engage in a dialogue around, if we said no to that, like what could we be saying yes to? What other things could you be doing or holding space for in your life, like kayaking around the lake at your lake house?
Yes, exactly.
And as they get older, like one of the things we do is we do a lot of family experiences that include friends. So I have this homeschool adventure club with all my kids' friends in it, and we make tons of new friends through it. And so we have these like weekly, really fun family experiences where all of their friends get to come, or they invite their friends when we do things. And, it's with sort of families that share similar values in many ways. So they still get like a lot of the things that they get from extracurricular type things. They'll work on shared goals and create these amazing projects. But we get to do it in a way that's a little bit more in alignment with our values. So to anybody listening, just keep questioning and keep engaging in that, using your values as your compass. What am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? Sort of dialogue with your partner.
Yes, I completely agree.
Now let's take a deep dive. What are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into minimalism? Let's give them a big list of things to buy. I'm kidding. Please don't.
Well, I'm thinking more about books.
Books and books. No, books are absolutely on the list. I feel like if it's an ebook, like I can consume it really quickly and then lend it to a friend and then delete it from my account. It works really well, and you can check things out from the library. Books are a go.
Okay, so I definitely got a lot of inspiration from the life-changing magic of tidying up, but I also knew that there was a lot that just definitely doesn't work for me in there. But that is what I would say would be sort of where I launched off and started learning more about minimalism, was with that book.
Me too.
My friend Zoe Kim wrote Minimalism for Families, and I think that is a great resource for people who are looking for a step-by-step plan, a room-by-room plan to get started.
I have on my list here under Dive Deeper, it says books, and it says Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up and Minimalism with Families.
Oh, perfect. So let me think. As far as other resources.
Well, your Instagram page and blog, of course, and you also have a podcast called Simple Families, and I'm going to link to all of that good stuff in the show notes.
Great. So, my other favorite resource would be, I don't know if it's a resource, but tip would be get rid of your bookshelves. And anywhere that holds stuff that doesn't really need to be there. I think that has been such an important way of getting rid of stuff, is by getting rid of the horizontal space. So bookshelves and lots of extra tables and that kind of thing in my house has really helped to simplify things and helped us to put things away more.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
One thing that I love is, I don't know if it's minimalist or not, but I found that it's been something that's very intentional and mindful for my family is our bird feeders. We're really into birds, and it has really drawn us outside. Even when we're inside, we're always looking outside, and it's really connected us to nature. I feel like we're always looking out the windows, seeing what kind of birds are at our bird feeders, and it's something that I didn't expect, but it definitely is something that is getting us out of the house and pulling us deeper and closer to nature for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. See, I love when you like find something, an object or an item, and it really does add value for you. And then you can feel really good about it because you're not drowning in 1,000 items that don't really add value. Like you kind of have to clear away the clutter in order to find the gems that really do add value to your life.
Yes, exactly.
Bird feeder added to my list. The Minimalist, that's my favorite podcast, even though it's not family oriented. I really enjoy listening to the Minimalist podcast along with your Simple Family podcast. On my blog, you can tour my house and my bathroom drawers and my purse and my paperwork and my closet. So basically, as I like dive into some area of my home, I take a bunch of pictures and blog about it. And then I have my Minimalist Wardrobe for Earth Mama's class, which is has been one of my favorite projects like to work on. It's been really, really fun, and I really enjoy that class. Oh, and there's a book that was really helpful to me in creating that class, Curated Closet. Have you read that?
I haven't. Who is that by?
Anushka.
Oh, yes. I follow her on Instagram.
Yes!
Yeah, I've seen
her
the
book was really good. Her book was good. You should read it.
Was it
I liked
good?
it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was good. It's not minimalist per se. I don't know if I would call her a minimalist, but it was really helpful as I was going through creating the Minimalist Wardrobe for Earth Mamas. It was helpful in like being able to choose the pieces that really would add value for someone. So I recommend that book as well.
Good. I'll have to check that out.
If you want the show notes sent right to your inbox, just subscribe over on sageparenting.com and you won't miss out on all the Sage family goodness. Thank you so much for joining me, Denaye. I really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.